Before we start this show, just a word from our sponsor, 20 by 20 Apparel. Founded in 2015, 20 by 20 Apparel brings original tributes to pro wrestling's classic arenas, moments, and events. They look to spotlight the bloopers, bleeps, and body slams along with the biggest, smallest, strangest, and strongest that pro wrestling has had to offer. Along with their awesome line of pro wrestling apparel, they do offer many services. In the world of wrestling, there are hundreds of shirts, promotions, flyers, social media accounts, and ads. Don't get lost in the sea of parody shirts and display fonts. They can provide professional graphic design services at a reasonable price. 20 by 20 also hand screen prints all the tees in-house. If you would like to discuss possible run of tees, posters, koozies, foam fingers, or whatever, drop them a line. Go to 20 by 20 Apparel. That's the number 20x, the number 20 apparel.com. Now, let's get to the show.
Fresh is the word.
I'm Jim Duggan, got long wood for plenty hoes. I keep it fresher than fresh, but you already know. You suckers bummy, I'm money, I got a ton of flows. My weed loud like a motherfucking thunder roll. Your shit quiet like you ballin' on a budget though. We see your kicks and we laugh and yellin' what are those. You see me shining like a suit on puffy. You know my grindin' shit is too strong, buddy. That's why the dude call money. I be stuntin' like it's nothing at all. Cause it's nothing to me, it's probably something to y'all. Trying to smoke like me, then come and fuck with your dog. Got a closet full of kicks, you can't cop it tomorrow. And I'm fresher than the freshest, you can tell it's in my essence. Bitch, you see the way I'm rapping, yes I do this shit to death. I tell I'm running out of breath, I tell somebody cut a check. But either way you know it's fresh, and either way you know it's fresh. Fresh, we fresh, fresh, goddammit, we fresh.
Welcome to the Fresh is the Word podcast. I'm your host, Kelly K. Fresh Frazier. And on Fresh is the Word, we like to deliver wisdom through great stories from the minds of bright creatives of pop culture. Through those stories, we like to dissect the journey of our guests and present actionable lessons and advice for our listeners, no matter what career or avenue of artistry they pursue. And before we get into this episode, I want to give a shout out to Knox Money, Bang Belushi, and Foulmouth for the theme music for Fresh is the Word. And if you would like to support the podcast, you can always go to freshisthepodcast.com and just share any of the links for any of the episodes on any of your social media platforms. And also, you can subscribe to Fresh is the Word pretty much anywhere that podcasts are streamed. And that includes Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, pretty much everywhere. And please rate and review, especially on Apple Podcasts. It will definitely help out the show. If you want to contact me, you can always reach me by email at djkfresh@gmail.com. Or you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at KFresh is the Word, and on Facebook at facebook.com/KFresh. And you can also follow Fresh is the Word on Twitter at Fresh is the Word, and that's is with an IZ, Instagram at Fresh is the Word Podcast, and Facebook at facebook.com/Fresh is the Podcast. And this is episode 148. The guest for this episode is the Scandinavian, Blackened, Ambient, Multi-Instrumentalist Sylvaine, the musical moniker of Catherine Shepard. Her latest album, Atoms Aligned, Coming Undone, released late last year via Season of Mist, was nominated for the Spellemannprisen, often referred to as the Norwegian Grammy Awards. She is the first ever woman artist to be nominated for the award in the metal category since they added the category in 2001. During our chat, we talked about her vision for her music, making music by herself, her experiences with parents that were in the music industry, how she goes through her days, how her music's been acclaimed in Scandinavia, the metal scene today in Norway, her musical tastes, her latest album, Atoms Aligned Coming Undone, where she gets inspiration, the effects of doing yoga, and the nature, society, and culture of Norway. And before we get into this interview, I definitely want to remind you about supporting the Fresh is the Word on Patreon at patreon.com/Fresh is the Word. For as little as $1, you can help out the podcast. It takes a little bit of money to do everything I need to do, and I love doing it. But it would definitely help me out if people can pitch in. And there's some great reward tiers that you can be a part of, including the $3 award tier, where I dig deep into my audio archives for interviews that I've done in the past outside the Fresh is the Word podcast and show them in their audio form for the first time. We already have 2 episodes in the books right now. The first one was an interview with Danny Brown from back in 2008 around the release of his Hot Soup album. And then the second Patreon-only podcast was an interview with Cool Keith back in June of 2010. Yeah. So, again, go over to patreon.com/freshoftheword and look at all the tiers that you can subscribe to. Well, all right, enough of that. Let's get on to the interview with Sylvaine. I first came about you just recently when your publicist sent me over a promo of your latest album, the latest album, Adam's a Line Coming Undone, and I was like, whoa, this is really great. I love like sort of that dichotomy of just like lush sounds and then also like some craziness in there. When you're making your music, because you write and compose everything yourself, what are you looking to really expose to your crowd?
Well, first, I just have to say thank you so much for your kind words about my music. It makes me really happy to hear when new people are discovering and that they find some cool stuff that they can like within it. So that's really nice. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, basically, since myself as a listener to music, I'm really open. Like, I really like all kinds of different types of music, all kinds of different sounds. I also really like to experiment. I have different like periods with different things that I'm listening to and that I'm working on myself. So I like to try to expose my listeners with my music to a little bit of everything. I really draw impulses from a lot of different genres, if you want to use that as a reference, which I think is basically what comes off in my music as well. My whole kind of concept behind Sylvaine was for the sound, was to create like this opposite forces, with the kind of dark, harsh, and heavy elements meeting the more lush and atmospheric textures and melodic lines and stuff. And that was what I really wanted to do with this band, basically.
A lot of times people just like, when they're musicians, they want to find people and just join a band and collaborate with other people. But you're writing and composing everything. You're like basically a one-woman band. Of course, you have other people in the studio to, make to record the songs and everything. But what was your idea of just, doing everything yourself, basically?
So basically, I did the same thing, like being in a band, and it's super fun being in a band, like being a group of a bunch of people just like hanging out together, making music together. And I did that for many years. I did like all kinds of different projects, ranging from just like an acoustic guitar and me, or like choirs, to full-blown bands, metal bands. And basically what I found out is that a lot of times the project ended up going in some kind of direction that wasn't like 100% me, which was totally fine. It was really still cool to be a part of, and it was really nice for like the human connection. But I decided that I wanted to try to put my personal music into a project that I could kind of control and that I could be kind of free with. Therefore, I decided that Sylvaine would be a solo project. So in the beginning, I wouldn't say that I didn't have ambitions, but I didn't believe that it was even possible. So I thought, well, let's give it a try. Let's see what happens. And that resulted in my first album. And as I was recording everything in the studio on my own, except for most of the drums that my dad did, which was very cool of him. Yeah, super cool. I realized that actually I had enough skills, if you want to call it that, to be able to express the emotions that my music needed. So therefore, I decided that I'm going to try to do as much as I can in Sylvaine, because it'll keep it as personal and pure as possible.
As as much fun as you said that you had being in other bands with other people, why do you feel like you weren't able to find a certain personal satisfaction with your creativity in that setting at that time?
I assumed that it was probably that I was with, I mean, in bands with people that probably didn't have like the same kind of vision that I had for what we were doing and stuff, which once again is totally not a problem. I'm not trying to like, say they were wrong or anything. It just, I didn't feel right bringing my personal stuff into the projects I was involved with, just because, yeah, I don't know, it just wasn't the right moment, probably not the right setting, maybe not the right people. I don't know. It just didn't work out that way. So I brought my own things into the bands as well, but I usually end up keeping most of my songs for myself just because I felt like it wasn't really a fit and I didn't want to impose my shit on other people.
Yeah, I kind of get that. Sometimes people just have like we kind of look at ourselves with our ideas and be like, yeah, nobody, no one's going to have these same ideas or the
Yeah,
same vision. So it's a little hard to like wanting to impose those on people because they might
exactly.
not get it.
Exactly, yeah. And you don't really want to be that guy, that's just like, no, we're going to do this because I mean, if it's a group effort, then yeah, if you're in a band where there's one leader, obviously, or like one person that's composing, it's cool. But if everyone's contributing and you have something that's quite specific and it's really not what the band has been doing up until that point, it's not, the easiest thing to do. Like, we're going to go in this direction and do this because I want to. That's so cool. So, yeah.
When you started really getting into doing the Sylvain project, by yourself, was there a moment when you realized, hey, this, could start to work out for me? What were some of the obstacles that you had to get past to really get going on this project?
I think the very first obstacle, which is like I was mentioning before, is just the fact that I had to get over the fact that I really just believe that I sucked completely at music. It's always been something that I've done since I was a kid, like because my father is a drummer and he's been doing it pro for like many, many years. My mom was working in the music industry, so I grew up with it, but I just never believed that what I had to say was good enough or important enough. So that was the first obstacle, just like saying fuck that and just trying just to see what happened when I expressed myself. And then later, it's been actually, I must say, I think I've been quite lucky so far in my journey with Sylvain. There's been some ups and downs with like other people that I've tried to work with that haven't been as serious or like haven't been as, pro or whatever. But I would say the main problem I've had would be myself, actually, which I guess is the case for a lot of artists. They're often their own worst enemy, and I'm not really an exception to that.
All right, definitely. So, yeah, you mentioned that both your parents are musicians, part of the music industry. What's, were they, have they always been supportive, and has there been anybody else that's been sort of a mentor for you?
Well, yeah, my parents have been extremely supportive. I think I could have gotten into pretty much anything that wasn't like self-destructive and they would have been supportive. But since it's music and they were so close with music, it's really just, that's meant that I've been very, very close to them. And they've been my number one fans, from day one, which is super cool because not everyone experiences that when they decide to go the musical route. So, except for that, I mean, I think everyone has like bands or musicians that they look up to. Like I usually mention Typo Negative for me because that was a band that kind of really opened my eyes to what's possible in like terms of mixing totally different styles or different sounds or different expressions and making this like super dreamy yet heavy yet melancholy but uplifting kind of music. So it's not a mentor or anything, but I would say that they really inspired me at least. Can't really say I've had any direct mentor except for that. So,
Right.
yeah.
With, having family that's been in the music industry also, what sort of a kid were you, and when did you like start getting the music bug yourself?
I have like really early memories from going to like band practice that my dad had, or like going to his rehearsal room and like banging around on the drums from probably when I was like 5 or 6, so like really early. But I didn't really realize that it was something that was like a way that I wanted to really express myself and a way that I could express things that I couldn't otherwise until I was maybe like 14 or something like that. I really started to get into, I got heavily into it. I was playing drums back then. I was singing. I was going into piano, and then afterwards I discovered bass a few years later, and then I got into guitar like just a few years ago. So yeah, maybe 14 is when I really realized that I really want to do this with my life, basically. And then I started trying.
How many instruments can you play, at this point?
Well, yeah, I'm really interested in knowing at least like the bare minimum on each instrument, just to realize kind of what the function of it is in a band situation. So I started with drums just because my dad was a drummer and he used to give me lessons back when I was 14 actually, and it was really cool. And it's like sort of such a physical instrument. It's both rhythmic and melodic, and it's just really cool. So yeah, I've been playing drums, bass, guitar, piano, keyboards, and harsh and clean vocals is basically what I've been into. And then I was gifted a theremin at some point, but it's so difficult to play. I also really wanted to get into like a few string instruments and stuff like that, but it's just, yeah, maybe a bit optimistic to think that I have time to do everything I want.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That could be yeah, when you have all that when all those instruments to play, you're like, hey, what time do I have to do this?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or anything else except for that. Like, yeah.
As somebody who has this project where you're writing and composing everything yourself, and you just brought up, time, how do you balance the time to work on your music and just sort of also decompress and just sort of, have some time to sort of recharge your batteries?
Yeah, that's not always completely easy, actually. And I have to say that too, because Sylvaine is my main job at the moment, so I'm just doing this every day, pretty much, for now, anyways. And you have to be quite disciplined, because you can very easily get into this routine of like just doing a little bit here, a little bit there, and that's it, and not much comes from it. So I actually manage my days kind of like any other person would. I have a schedule that I follow more or less, which involves like other activities, but mostly like mornings are usually like doing the business side, which means emails and back and forth with people, and talking to like my label or booking agent, stuff like that. And then usually my full afternoon and evening schedule is dedicated to whatever creative project I'm working on. Right now I'm working on an EP, for example, as well as my next album. So yeah, each day I'm working on either writing, practicing, or recording demos or ideas. So yeah, it's sometimes hard to find time to do everything that I would like, and sometimes I'm spending more time than I would like on the kind of more non-creative stuff, like business related things, since I'm taking care of everything on that side too. But I have to say it's been super, super wonderful to be able to spend the last few years doing this, and I try my best to manage my time as well as I can.
Yeah, I was reading that for this latest album, Adam's the Line Coming Undone, that you were nominated for the Spellman Prize. Am I saying that
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
Spellman Prize in the metal category, and you were the first female artist to be nominated in that award since they added the category in 2001. How does it feel to get recognition for this album in your region?
It's extra cool because Norway hasn't been like the biggest market for me yet. Like I kind of knew already when I got into this, and I knew the sound that I was looking for hasn't been super popular in Norway. It's really getting better these last few years, but still. So I knew that it would be difficult for me there, and to be nominated for this like Norwegian Grammy Award, Spellemannprisen thing, was super, super cool, because it did actually draw attention to my band in Norway, and it opened a few doors for me, some things that you will see later that will be announced later. So it's really, really cool. And I was very, very grateful that the jury that was working on this recognized or basically said that my album was good enough to be among all of these like famous old bands that have been around forever. So it was a really big honor for me, and very cool because yeah, I think everyone likes to be recognized in their own country, obviously. So
right.
Yeah.
Why do you feel like they recognized your album in particular when you say that maybe your sound wasn't very, accepted or represented in your area?
Well, I think this kind of like, I mean, I'm not a big fan of genre, but if we call it like a post metal or alternative metal, black gaze or whatever, this kind of music is actually on the rise in Scandinavia since the last few years. Um, but I don't know actually, because when I look at the other bands in this category, they are, I mean, not more traditional, except for one of the other bands that were like completely grindcore, which was also very exceptional. Um, I think maybe it's just a matter of bringing out something new in the scene. Maybe that's why they saw this my record and they thought that this should be highlighted in the year that passed. So I don't really know, but I think it's something that's on the rise in Norway at the moment. So it might just be a matter of timing for me as well.
Yeah, I think when, people outside of that area think of Norway and metal, we think of like the really black metal, like the
Yeah.
really just black metal, this really scary stuff,
Of course.
From, as someone being from there, what's sort of the, what's Norwegian metal look like these days?
I think it's quite diverse, actually. I mean, you do have a lot of the old black metal bands that are still going, like Emperor or Satyricon or Dimmu Borgir or Mayhem. All these bands, they're still going. And I mean, uh, some bands, like for example Dark Throne, they try to venture into like other kind of different sounds, which I think is really cool. You also have a lot of newer acts that are still doing like the black metal thing. You also have a lot of bands doing like death metal or like more symphonic stuff. Or there's a big variety. There's also like a huge trend everywhere now with this kind of folk metal, like Viking metal stuff, like with Vardruna or these kind of bands.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a diversity. I mean, you probably have the like old school metalheads in Norway as well that really just want to listen to true stuff. But I think in general, it's opening up, which is kind of cool. Which probably is why my band can exist in this market now.
How is sort of like the show party or concert scene, out there in your area? When you're going to shows, or other bands are putting on shows, how, what's the, the vibe of all of that?
Well, I mean, I know a lot of people when they come to Norway to play, they're a little bit traumatized by the audience because I'm sure you've heard the reputation of us being quite cold in the north, which is probably not completely untrue. But yeah, the audience is a little bit stoic, but I think in general the Norwegian music scene is filled with people that are really into music, like they really appreciate it, and it's just that at concerts it kind of comes off as a little bit like lifeless, if I can say that. But it's just people really respectful and like enjoying the music. So I would say that the concert scene it can be very like that, like a bit more like serious, and the metal scene is probably colored by that a bit more. And then you also have like the completely opposite with like the pop bands or like other bands where you have audiences that are just insane, and it's cool. But yeah, I think the music scene in Norway is quite nice these days, and I think the people are nice. And when you go to shows, it's a good ambience. There's no I don't feel a lot of because I also live in France, and sometimes when you go to like a black metal show, especially in France, in Paris, I have to say, the crowd there is like really, really pretentious and really like self-righteous, and just it's really difficult to be around those people. So I don't get that in Norway, just have to say.
Right. Outside of metal, is there any other types of music that you draw inspiration or just a fan of?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I like everything from like Run the Jewels to like Philip Glass and Slowdive and Type O Negative, as I mentioned, to like Burzum or Emperor or whatever. So yeah, I like all kinds of music. I've been really inspired by minimalism, like with Philip Glass and Steve Reich and these guys. I really love this kind of, or Max Richter, the newer version. And also like I really love the British music from the 80s and 90s, from like the complete Britpop stuff to like shoegaze and all these kind of different like new wave bands and all this stuff, post-punk things. They're really, really cool as well. Also really enjoy a lot of movie scores and game scores. Like I recently discovered this game called Journey. It's not really new. It's a few years old now, but the soundtrack for this game blew my mind. It's like one of the best things I've heard in years. So yeah, like a lot of different things basically. Don't listen that much to metal these days, which is kind of ironic in a way.
Right. No, I understand that. I understand that. Is there, outside of, of music, is there anything else that you sort of consume that you draw inspiration from or just, do for fun?
Yeah, absolutely. I draw inspiration from a lot of stuff. I think one of the number one inspirational sources I have is nature. So for like you asked about decompression, like to decompress and reconnect with myself, I really love to just like go out in nature, have a walk, just like sit in the woods, I don't know, go by the sea, this kind of stuff. That's one of my favorite things to do. Living in cities, and especially when I'm in Paris, it's really difficult because it's like nature is just not present at all. So that's one thing. I also really love to read. I love to watch movies and TV shows. I also love to play games. Like I'm really into retro gaming, like with all old consoles, especially the Nintendo consoles, which I'm really a fan of. Also like board games. I'm quite a geek actually, to be very honest. And I'm also heavily into yoga and meditation as well. So a lot of different things that I can draw inspiration from and that I can use to switch it up, basically.
Right. Yeah, I'm definitely going to yoga class later on today. I haven't been in a few days.
Good for you. That's good.
I do yoga regularly.
Oh, perfect. Me too. I do it every day.
Getting into yoga and meditation, how does that sort of make you feel, and how does that kind of balance your life and your music out?
I think I started doing yoga every day, maybe like 1.5 years ago now, and I swear, and meditation as well. It has changed my life. Like it really changes the way you see things, and therefore I think it also brings forth something that really opens up like creative worlds to you. So yeah, it's because what I'm writing about in Sylvaine is really related to kind of a spiritual realm anyways. I think that the yoga and meditation is probably bringing me even closer to my beliefs and to my to everything that is already in the project, which is quite cool. It gives me new ways of seeing the things that I've been like wondering about or that I have been writing about, because it's can be sometimes difficult subjects to speak about.
And talk more about the content of your songs and when you do the Sylvaine project, that spiritual aspect, what are you really trying to get out, in the lyrics of these songs?
So I kind of wanted to make this project because I felt like there was, I mean, like I'm sure a lot of people feel, some kind of something inside me that never really left. It was kind of like a yearning for something. Like I felt like I was disconnected from something, or like put in the wrong time, or something of the sorts. And as I've been making music and as I've been trying to express this like kind of like ultimate spiritual homesickness, I've come to realize that I think it's because all of us are basically just we have, I mean, our human body belongs to this place, and inside there's a soul that doesn't belong to here, that pertains to something way more ancient, way more grand and vast, and something that we can't really connect to while we're here. Therefore, some of us, maybe more than others, have this kind of longing for that original place, if I can call it that. And that's something I'm trying to speak about in my music. I also try to speak about the difficulties that arise from having that kind of belief, and kind of like there's something that's missing that you can't really fill because you're kind of limited by your human senses, by your human form. So yeah, that's basically what I made Sylvaine because of. And also on Adam's Line Coming Undone, I also couldn't help but be inspired by looking at the outside world and how things are kind of not going super well these days.
Right.
It became almost like a parallel to what I was speaking about originally with my personal feelings about how we humans exist, and the soul being separate and everything. So yeah, fun times, fun stuff.
During these times that during this journey that you've done making these songs, has there been anything through all this sort of personal writing that you've been able to learn about yourself?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's a really good way. It's like looking in the mirror, kind of, when you're making stuff like that, both for the better and for worse. Yeah, you kind of see your own limits. You see things that you would like to change in yourself. You see things that you won't be able to change. So yeah, I would definitely say it's a good way to get to know yourself as well when you're creating art. I guess everyone feels that way, but it's often dealing with matters that are not necessarily positive, but still, it's useful in the big picture.
When you're making art like this, how sort of brave do you have to be to, accept things that you need to change and accept things that you can't change?
I think you have to be, I mean, brave. Yeah, sure, you can use that word. I think it's just a lot of people, they don't want to necessarily even take a look at themselves or the world or whatever, to actually sit down and reflect what can be done, what needs to be done, and what can't be changed necessarily. It's just how things work here, like you have to accept some things and just live with them, and other things you can work on. And that's not an easy thing to do, like, especially when you're talking about working on yourself. It's really, really difficult. And sometimes it's hard to accept things. But yeah, I think you just have to be realistic and try to stay objective about things, not take everything too personal, but like, yeah, see things in the big scheme if it's possible.
When it comes to the outside world, there's crazy stuff going on everywhere. But when it comes to Norway, what's going on there in society from your perspective?
Well, I have to say, I think Norway is lucky in a way because I think we're quite a protected society in that, for now, anyways, like the government we have are trying to kind of ruin it. But for now, all the social aspects are very secure, and like it's really difficult, I think, I have to say, to be completely miserable and like just have a horrible life over there. I know the class differences are getting bigger in Norway as well, but in general, I think we're quite safe compared to some other countries. Just like everywhere, the politics and everything like that is not great. Politicians are, they are what they are everywhere, it seems like. And yeah, we, just like any other countries, we have aspects that we need to work on. Like I can mention, for example, I don't think we take very good care of old people in Norway. That's something that we really need to work on. But in general, I think society there is quite good for now, at least, because I look at other places in the world and I think that, yeah, we're quite lucky.
Yeah, one thing that I always, you always think of like in Norway is, and you mentioned it earlier, is like trees. There's always like little, you always see bands getting pictures in forests and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What's sort of like the beautiful aspects of Norway that you feel like maybe people don't really know about?
Well, one thing I can say from my own city, which is Oslo, like not very original, I know, the capital, but still, one thing that I really love about this place is the fact that you have, if you want like the city life, you have the city there, you have like old parts that are really cute, and then you have the sea, just like you can, yeah, just by walking distance, you can see, you can drive your car and you have mountains, like huge mountains. You can drive your car a little bit another direction, you have like huge forest. It's really, even though, yes, I would say the Norwegian landscape up until like quite far north, it's a little bit similar, with like this very vast forest, huge mountains, like nice lakes and like fjords and rivers and stuff. Further north, you don't have much trees. Like you get over a certain limit, and it looks kind of like you're on the moon, which is really cool. A bit like Iceland. It's a bit the same feeling. But yeah, I think it's basically the fact that no matter where you are always super close to nature, and therefore, as we were raised in Norway, we're always taught the value of the connection with nature. Like we spend a lot of time in nature, and yeah, I feel like not all countries necessarily have that. And I mean, yeah, I know I'm basically saying the same thing that you're saying. You think about trees, and yeah, basically the trees are a good part of the country. So, but yeah, I like this closeness to nature that we kind of get that we're taught when we're kids there.
How does that closeness with nature sort of lend itself to just the everyday society?
Well, I know like it's there's a lot of people that spend a lot of time outdoors. I mean, like, of course, because Norway is a rich country, there's a lot of technology and a lot of like, iPhones, iPads, whatnot, things there as well. But I know that like, for example, just taking a hike with a family, that's something you do every single week. Like going out and spending time by a lake or, like this kind of stuff. It's like really embedded into the Norwegian culture. Or in the wintertime, you have the skiing, of course, which is very important as well. So I think it's like on if not daily, at least a weekly basis, people really go out and kind of use the nature and spend time there. Maybe not everyone has the same kind of connection to it as me personally, like, as a more spiritual place, but people at least go there and like they seek these places.
What do you feel like people get out of like seeking nature in your area?
I think, I mean, it's a way to find kind of peace from all the noise, and noise in the sense of not just like actually like sound, but like noise in like impressions from everyday life. I think it's a really good way to de-stress. I think it's a really good way to reconnect with yourself. I think it's a good way to keep your body in good shape. I mean, like there's so many positive things by going out and using nature. I think in Norway these days, it's a lot about keeping your body in shape, because I know like physical health is like, very, very valued now. It's like really, really, you're almost supposed to be an athlete, like no matter who you are. But so yeah, you do have a lot of like crazy sports fanatics in the woods, but still, there's so many different benefits that I think, yeah, people just use the nature for all kinds of different reasons.
What's sort of like social life in Oslo and Norway like? What's the typical way people go out and spend their time? What's the typical way people go out and date one another?
Well, we have this thing in that I realized after leaving Norway a little bit, that is kind of typically Norwegian, is the working hard all week and then like going completely berserk on the weekends. That's like that's kind of how it works. Like you do your serious thing during the week, and then during the weekend you get so drunk that you can't even walk anymore. That's kind of the thing. For me, I don't actually drink, so I mean I'm not a part of that. But that's kind of like the cliche Norwegian model, if I can say. Because we tend to be quite private and not maybe the most like, we're not like Latin, we're not very open about our feelings and stuff. Dating can be complicated. So I assume that people are using Tinder and stuff like that to make things easier. But yeah, I mean, it's the nightlife is good. It's a lot of stuff happening. There's always a concert, like every single day of the week you have a concert to go to. There's all kinds of like, other things like theater, movies, whatever. So yeah, there's a rich nightlife. There's a rich social life there, basically. Just I know that sometimes people coming from the outside, they say it can be kind of difficult to penetrate like the Norwegian groups of people, because we can be a bit coldish, I guess, until we get to know you, kind of thing.
How do you feel like an outsider can sort of warm up to your regular Norwegian person or group of people?
Well, I think it's just like with anyone else. You just have to get to spend some time and get to know the person. I mean, I don't think there's anything too mystical about it. It's just like a matter of spending some time together. Maybe it's a bit less, I mean, maybe it takes a bit more time than with some other people from other countries. But yeah, and in general, we're like a friendly people. It's just that we're a bit more, we're taught from the beginning, like that you're not supposed to like meddle in other people's business. So we're just a little bit quiet, I guess.
I mean, that's some good advice, I think.
Yeah, I just don't give up. Just spend time with the person. That's my advice. Just don't give up.
And for people that are outsiders coming into Norway, what's some other like things that they should know, like the do's and don'ts, or things, myths that you feel like that your area has?
So yeah, of course, with the coldness, the number one thing I hear about when people talk about Norway or even like Finland or I'm not sure about Sweden, but Norway and Finland, I've heard this a lot. The thing about like on public transportation, don't talk to other people because they'll think you're crazy, which is kind of true. That's kind of true. It's like also if there's like several free seats, don't sit next to someone else because God forbid you don't want human contact. That's kind of true. I would also say, in general, Norwegian people are really polite. So don't, I mean, have good manners basically, because we're taught that way as well. Like say thank you, say please, say excuse me, this kind of thing. We're also kind of, like I said, quiet. So we don't necessarily like super like loud people that take a lot of space. I mean, you always have them everywhere, but
Yeah.
in general, I don't think it's the thing I see the most in Oslo. Maybe more in Oslo actually, because it's a big city, but still that kind of thing, you know, just be polite and stuff like that. And otherwise, I would say that even if it seems a bit cold to begin with, we're not, again, we're friendly and stuff like that. So just, yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. Yeah, we're. I don't think anybody likes those loud, obnoxious people in public, but unfortunately, here in the states, it just there's nothing we can do about it.
Right. Right. Well, it's okay. I mean, you know, that's totally fine.
Right. So this is a question I always like to ask people in the interviews. What is, sort of a lesson, a nugget of knowledge from your life and career that anybody listening to this, doesn't matter what sort of avenue of artistry that they're in, that they sort of could project into their own life?
Work hard. That's like my number one advice. No matter what you're doing in life, like no matter what you are interested in or you want to achieve, work hard, like, apply yourself. Make sure that when you think that you've done enough, you can still do a little bit more. Because I think a lot of people, and also follow through, like finish stuff. When you start something, try to finish it. Because I really think people tend to give up too fast, and that can be on anything. It can be on like giving up on writing a song. It can be giving up on like getting your life together, giving up on your relationship, whatever. Just follow through, work hard. That's what I would say.
And as somebody who does so many different facets of the music making process, and this is something that I even struggle with. I'm not a musician, but I got there's all these sorts of other avenues of artistry that I do. How do you sort of balance everything, get other things started while doing the other things? And also, how do you stay honest with yourself about, okay, maybe I was interested in this one thing, but maybe it's just not for me? How do you sort of make all those decisions and, like you said, finish these projects and work hard?
I think it's basically like a matter of if you start something, you have to like at least give it a shot before you give up. Like you basically sometimes, for example, if I'm taking myself as an example, I'll start working on a riff that I found that I'm not like completely inspired by. I'm not 100% convinced it's going to work, or maybe it sounds too much like something else, or something that I just don't feel is the best thing I ever made. But I'll still try to make a song out of it, or like finish my demo for the song before I just move it into the big idea pile that never gets used. Just simple things like that, don't sometimes you'll be surprised, like something you might not necessarily think is great, or like that you're not sure will lead anywhere, will actually point you in a direction that you didn't even imagine. So, but of course, I mean, that being said, there's no shame in giving up on things. I just think that people sometimes have a tendency to give up too fast. I can get demotivated too fast. You just need to give things a chance. And then of course, if you've been working on whatever project for 10 years and nothing's happening, it's probably safe to say that you can move on. There's a limit there too. So, but you just have to feel it out.
How big is your idea pile, and how often do you go back to it?
Every time I start a new album, I always revisit everything there. I listen to the ideas, and almost every time I'm a bit like, but yeah, okay, there's a reason why they're here. So, I mean, I have one file of one folder of unused songs, because after each album, there's always some songs left behind, like for Atoms, I think it was maybe 4 or 5 tracks that didn't make it onto the record. And then I also have a whole folder full of just ideas, like riffs or vocal lines that I've been singing into my phone or stuff like that. And sometimes, it'll sound like nothing, but then when it comes down to it, you start working on it and you're like, this is actually can be quite cool. So yeah, I do revisit those ideas quite often, and sometimes also just to get inspiration to do something based, off of that, like not necessarily just that riff, but like doing something, it'll inspire something else. So I think it's useful to have stuff like that.
What's your, you mentioned that you're working on some projects for the future, but ultimately, what's sort of like your, grand ideas for the future for yourself, whether it's with this Sylvaine project or with anything else that you would love to do?
That's a good question. I think my main ambition with Sylvaine is just to make sure that everything that I release is surpasses itself. If that sounds pretentious, I don't mean to say that. I mean, just like to make sure that I still make good music. Like I won't release something just to release something. Like my only ambition is to make something that can make other people feel. That's the only thing I want. And then, of course, in addition to that, I would love to tour different places. Like I would love to tour Asia, North America, go back to South America, those kind of things. Absolutely would love that because I really like playing shows. And yeah, I mean, I guess ultimately I would like to also evolve the spiritual side of my life more. So, but yeah, I think my number one goal is just to be able to continue making music like now and make sure that I make stuff that can actually speak to other people as well.
How does the Sylvaine project translate into a live show?
So I have 3 musicians with me on stage, French musicians, really nice guys, really great guys, talented musicians. And it's basically we try to recreate what's on record. Obviously, because I brought 3 guys into the project, it doesn't sound exactly the same because they brought a bit of themselves into each part. But yeah, I think it's I really, really liked the live setup, and based on the feedback we had from audiences so far, it still seems to take people somewhere when they listen to us. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
What do you hope the listeners, that audience, gets from listening to your music or seeing your live show?
Honestly, anything that speaks to them, or anything that just makes them feel something. It can be pretty much whatever. Like I'm not the one to dictate what they're supposed to feel. I know what I felt when writing the music, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it will be the same experience for the people listening. So just the fact of being able to touch someone in some kind of way is mind-blowing to me.
And before we get out of here, I always like to end my interviews with this same question and see if you have an answer for it. I always like to get suggestions for people to interview for this podcast. Who would be somebody that's been a part of your life or career that I could realistically interview for this podcast that would have some great stories or lessons to talk about?
Well, I can mention my better half, Nej from Alcest. He's an incredibly, incredibly talented musician, a very, very kind soul, and someone that has many, many stories to tell after being in this band. I mean, having this band for like so many years. It's also a solo project, so that's a person I definitely could recommend. There's also, I have to just like, it just came into my mind here. There's another person that I could recommend that has the craziest stories and is like the best guy that you'll meet. That's also a French band. It's called Aluk Todolo. It's a French band. They play this kind of dark, I don't know, jazzy music. It's really, really cool. And the drummer there, Antoine, this guy, he's the bomb. You should talk to him.
Great. That's great. So, yeah, thanks for doing this interview with me. It's been great talking with you. I loved hearing everything you had to talk about. Like, you were just awesome to talk to.
Oh, thank you so much. It was really nice talking to you, too. Like, time just flew by.
Right. Before we get out of here, where can people go online to get more information about what you're up to?
So, the usual platforms. We're on Instagram, like Sylvaine Music, on Facebook, Sylvaine Music as well. And there's like a official website too. Must say I'm not the best at updating that, so maybe social media is better. So yeah, those 2 places for sure.
So that was my interview with Sylvaine. Her album, Atoms Align, Coming Undone, has been one of my favorite albums that I've heard over the past year. And it's one of my go-to albums to listen to when I am in public reading comic books. Whether I'm at a coffee shop or at work or whatever. It's a good thing to listen to while I'm reading comic books, because the vocals are very... So it's the perfect thing to listen to while you're reading. It doesn't have to be comics. It can be anything. More information is in the show notes for this episode, to where you can purchase Atoms Aligned, Coming Undone on digital CD and LP formats. And more information too about where you can follow Sylvaine online. And also, I'd like to say that her suggestions for people to interview for this podcast were really great. Niche from Alcest. I checked out Alcest. Oh my God, amazing band. And Antoine from Aluk Todolo, another cool band. So hopefully we can get Antoine and Niche on the Fresh Was the Word podcast in the future. And oh yeah, if you're in Toronto over this weekend, meaning between May 9th to the 13th, I'll be in town for the Toronto Comics Arts Festival. And I will be doing a spotlight panel on Saturday the 11th for the book Death Threat by Vivek Shaurya and illustrated by Ness Lee. We're going to be talking about the book, the inspiration behind it during this panel. For more information about that panel, you can always go to torontocomics.com, and all the information about about TCAF and everything else that's going on during that festival will be on the website. They have a really good website with everything that is going on and the times and how you can sign up. It's a total free festival, and it looks awesome, and I can't wait to be in Toronto this weekend. So that was another interview in the books. Thanks for listening. Goodbye and good night.
Fresh is the word.